Hey everyone, today I'm going to go through the biggest mistake I made intermittent fasting, so maybe you can avoid it. So my name is Ed, and I started intermittent fasting when I was 55 years old. And I have to admit I made some great progress with it. I've lost over 40 pounds, I lost a ton of belly fat, and I feel better than I have in years. But I made one mistake that almost ruined the entire program for me, and that is that I lost 25 pounds in the first 30 days. Now, although that sounds great, there's definitely some reasons that is not the way you want to start intermittent fasting. So let me explain. So here's a picture of me when I started intermittent fasting, and you can tell I definitely needed to lose some weight, especially around the midsection. But to visualize the problem properly, you have to take a look at my spirit animal, the 90,000-gallon tanker truck. With that giant tank on the back, you would think this truck would be able to drive about 50,000 miles without stopping for fuel. But we all know that's not how the truck works. The truck's designed to use the fuel that's in its 200-gallon main tanks, and it's not designed to use that 9,000 gallons in the back. Well, what we don't realize is that our bodies kind of work the same way. Just like there's no switch in that truck that lets the truck driver just flip a switch and start using the fuel in the back, there's no immediate switch that lets you just decide that you want to start using fat for fuel just because you watched a few videos on YouTube about intermittent fasting. So let's go to another terribly embarrassing photo of myself before I started intermittent fasting. Now, you see that the big fuel tank around my midsection started with about 110,000 calories, which you would think is long enough to live for about 45 days just on my belly fat. But here's the problem. I, like everyone else who's carrying extra fat that they don't really know how they got, can't use the fat for fuel. Our cells forget. Now, the mitochondria in our cells are originally designed to use two fuel sources, glucose and ketone bodies, which are made by your liver from your fat. But over time, if you are not ever burning fat, your cells will adapt to never using fat for fuel. They basically forget how to use ketone bodies as a source of fuel. So if you're like me and you've had constant access to carbs since before the turn of the century, the cells have become highly adaptive and they're not using ketone bodies, it's pointless to rush into dumping all these ketone bodies into your bloodstream that your cells aren't able to use. The key point that I missed, and the point that most people miss starting out, is you can't just jump right into something like this and expect your body to switch over immediately and start burning fat for fuel. Here's a graph of my first 4 months intermittent fasting. Now, the graph is from fastinglog.com, which is a free website and mobile app that I actually developed. And you can go to fastinglog.com to get started. Just make sure you subscribe to my channel, since the channel is where I give all the instructions you need to know on how to actually use the mobile app, the Android app, and the website. So now if you look at this graph, it looks like, wow, he did really great. He lost 25 pounds in the first 30 days. But the reality is my belly fat didn't go down at all. I lost a bunch of weight in my face. I looked terrible. My arms were thin, and I lost a lot of weight, but it wasn't from the point that I wanted to lose. So here's what the graph should have looked like. I shouldn't have tried to lose so much weight at first, because at that point, the weight I'm losing is muscle weight, water weight, burning through glycogen. It's not what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do is get rid of my belly fat. So had I spent the time at first getting fat adapted, allowing my body to adjust to using fat for a fuel source, I would have had much more reasonable losses at first, and I would have been much better off in the long run. I want to emphasize a certain point that body weight is not the most important factor. So here's two more embarrassing photos. The one on the left, I weigh 177 pounds. And on the photo on the right, I weigh 177 pounds. I weigh exactly the same in both of these photos, and both of these photos are taken during intermittent fasting. And what this shows is the scale really isn't a reliable measurement of the progress that you're making. So what I should have done, and what I recommend you do, is get the eating pattern down first while you're becoming fat adapted. Spend the time figuring out what's the right eating window and adjust first to the intermittent fasting before you worry about cutting your calories so far that you start losing weight. You still get huge benefits just by getting your body into that fasted state every day where your body is learning and adapting to using fats for fuel. Think of it this way, if you haven't done any jogging or any running since high school, you're not gonna go out in the first week and decide that you're gonna run a 5K. You're gonna build up to it. And intermittent fasting works exactly the same way. You need to build up your ability to do the different things you wanna do with intermittent fasting. It's going to take about 2 to 3 weeks to really start getting fat adapted if you're doing a 16-8 program. Now, you don't even need to rush into the 16-8 program. Any day that you get to the point where you're in a fasted state is helping you improve on becoming fat adapted. Now, within fastinglog.com, I set an arbitrary goal of about 270 hours because that's about the point where I started to feel like I was able to use fats for fuel much more efficiently. Now, in another video, I do actually talk about the things you'll notice when you become fat adapted and how you can tell that you've reached the different level. Here's my progress graph for fat adaptation. Now, you can see at this point, I'm over 1,700 hours in a fasted state. So I'm constantly amazed at how much easier everything becomes when you get to that point of being fat adapted. And then this log below shows each day. And a red icon shows that I didn't make it into a fasted state that day. A green icon shows that I did. So I just try to get as many days as possible where I make it into a fasted state. Now, because I'm 1,700 hours into this fat adaptation thing, I'm very flexible with what I want to do with intermittent fasting. So let's just review real quick what I wanted to cover. So when you start intermittent fasting, your body doesn't know how to use fat for fuel. That's something you need to adapt to. So it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks before you're able to burn fat for fuel and 2 to 3 months before you're doing it very well. Okay? So at first, you want to focus on doing the program properly and don't focus too much on cutting calories. And then when you reach that point where you're burning fat, ramp up your progress slowly. Now, I've found personally anything more than a pound a week means I'm starting to cut into muscle, which it just means I have to go back and build it back later, which isn't something I necessarily want to do. Now, once you've become fat adapted, you can adjust your programs to make it more specific. If you need to lose belly fat, which was my problem, that you can do that. If you do want to do a body transformation where you lose fat and then gain muscle, that's something else you can do. But you can't do any of that until you become fat adapted. So at first, with intermittent fasting, that needs to be your main goal. Last thing I want to cover is change it up over time. Like everything else, if once you get into it, you're going to some type of plateau. So just be prepared to change it up. So that's everything that I wanted to cover today. So just make sure you hit like and subscribe and then visit fastinglog.com, and good luck with your success intermittent fasting.